Hello and welcome to this month's drawing and painting tutorials. This month I'm going to link the two classes together so that in the first class you can see how to draw an illustration for a book and then transfer it to the watercolor paper, and in the second class I'll show you how I would go about painting it. I'm doing that because there's a lot of interest in things like cartooning, drawing for comic books, and illustrating for children's books, which is one of the things that I happen to do. So I'm going to show you in these two classes this month how I go about the process of illustrating a children's book. This is an illustration from a book that I'm working on. What I've done is I've taken reference photos and then I've pieced my photos together using Photoshop and printed them out on a good quality color paper. I like to start my illustration with as much accuracy in my photo references as possible, and it's a lot easier for me to be looking at one picture as opposed to one picture for the boy, one for the wagon, one for this tree, one for the path, and so on. It also gives me a chance to see how the finished illustration is going to look when I put everything together on Photoshop. So that is what I would suggest to you if you find yourself needing to illustrate. Even if you want to make up your own characters, do yourself a favor and get references for the scene that you want in the background of the characters. And of course, make sure that you have your people who are posing for you sign releases so that you have the right to duplicate those images. Then I would lay down two pieces of thin drawing paper like this. Just use as many pieces as you need to have it fit. And then I would hold that up to a light box or a window and trace those images. When the tracings are done, I'm going to have something that looks like this, and I place the text on the pages as well. That way I know where I need to make allowances for the text in the illustration, and I don't wind up illustrating a tree right where some words need to be or something like that. So this is step number 2. For step number 3, I want to show you how I go about doing that. First of all, I'm going to cut the margins off one of the pieces of paper so that they can butt up really close together. Just like this. Then I'm going to tape that in place. And then I'm going to use a piece of transfer paper, like you see here. Now you can buy transfer paper in sheets or on a roll. I like to use the roll for my illustrations because that way I can accommodate any size paper that I need to. So now I'll sandwich the watercolor paper on the bottom, then my taped together sketch on top of that transfer paper. And if you're afraid that the paper might move around, tape those 3 pieces together and it won't be a problem. Now, really important, keep your margins in mind. See what I almost did? I almost drew the paper, I almost drew the illustration. This will give me about a 1.5 inch margin on this side, plenty on the sides, and about the same on the top. So that's excellent, and I will tape down these 3 pieces together. Now underneath all of this, I not only have the original photo, which I'm going to just place off to the side, I have a board with a nice smooth piece of plastic taped over it. And that is to keep me from transferring any weird textures onto the illustration or any unwanted gaps or lines, anything like that. So make sure that you have a nice, clean, smooth surface to work on. Then, this is very important, I have a 2H pencil and I have my sandpaper block so that I always keep a very sharp tip on that pencil. I don't always have to be sharpening it, but if I'm rubbing the tip against the sandpaper, then my point at least is nice and sharp. Because what you're going to find is that when you are using transfer paper, it's only helpful if those lines transfer for you. And they don't if you don't press hard enough. So before you go too far, here I'm going to trace something up in this corner. Here's a little branch. Lift up the corner and make sure that that line is transferring for you. And also make sure that it's not transferring too dark, because you want to have the information, but you don't necessarily want it to look like a coloring book. You just want enough information so that you can fill it in without having to redraw the entire scene from scratch. You can also use this technique in any fine arts that you want as well. This is just a matter of transferring your drawing or your sketch to your watercolor paper or any opaque surface. You could also use this with canvas or artboard or anything else that is opaque enough that you can't see through it even with a light box. So this is a nice time-saving device to keep in mind for you in your studio, whether you enjoy illustrating or you're strictly a fine artist. Alright, so I'm going to do the rest of this off camera, just transferring the important lines. Everything that I transferred on my tracing is what I'm going to transfer onto the watercolor paper. And then I'll show you the next step. Okay, here's how my lines traced for me. Once I flip the paper back over, I can see a few broken lines here and there that I'd like to fill in. And I also see a few that I would like to lighten or fix. So I'm going to do a little bit of polishing work here. But remember, this is strictly the work that I need to do to make this a finished illustration. I don't need to make it a finished drawing. So even when I'm done with this stage, it's still going to be an outline. But I want to make these mechanical lines nice and straight. There's a nice wagon bar. Same thing on the house. And this is where the text is going to go. So I don't want to have too many details. Your painting is going to be as good as your sketch, and it's really not going to be better than your sketch. So always take the time to do the extra work. I'm not going to do too much work in the trees because that is something that I need to paint and have a little bit more loose. But I do want to know where some of these branches should go, and I want to know the basic shape of the outside of all those trees also. When you get your drawing cleaned up, then do some thinking. How are you going to start painting it? You want your colors to be smooth, you want the process to be fast. And it's going to be a lot faster if I can paint right over that boy and his wagon without having to avoid him. So my next step is to protect the boy and the wagon so that I can paint that background more quickly and more professionally. So I need to get some masking fluid or Frisket film and protect this boy and his wagon. Here's my Frisket film. Just make sure that you're drawing on the shiny side because that's the side of the sticker. And then if you can't see it very well, do the extra work and outline a little more darkly. Now I can see that more easily. And if you're not exactly sure about a line, then make it a little bit smaller because you can easily outline with the masking fluid anything that you missed. Okay, I'll cut him out. Then match it up before you peel off the backing and double check your accuracy. That's pretty good. Then I peel from the top down, and if there are tricky lines, I don't take the whole peel off. I just do enough of it to match up that much, and then I peel the rest off. That's good, but his head is covering up too much, so I'm going to peel off that head and cut it off. So I'll just fill in that head with the masking fluid anything else that needs to be filled in. I'm also going to do the same thing on the wagon, but that is all there is to creating your drawing and transferring it for an illustration. So for the next class, I'll show you how I would go about painting that.